What happens when the most powerful man in the city discovers that the woman who cleans his floors has been eating stale bread in the rain outside his mansion every day? Marcus Wellington thought he knew everything about his perfectly ordered world until one stormy evening changed everything. This isn't just another rich man meets poor woman story. This is about the moment when a heart that had forgotten how to feel suddenly remembered what it meant to be human. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and sometimes the person you've been looking for has been right under your nose all along. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Wellington penthouse, like angry fists demanding entry. Marcus Wellington stood motionless, his reflection ghost-like in the glass, watching the city below blur into watercolor streaks. At 34, he commanded an empire worth billions, owned properties across 3 continents, and could buy or destroy most people with a single phone call. Yet tonight, something felt different. Something felt wrong. His personal assistant had left an hour ago. The board meeting scheduled for tomorrow would determine the fate of another small company he planned to acquire. The numbers were solid. The strategy was flawless. Everything was proceeding exactly as it should. So why did he feel this strange emptiness gnawing at his chest? Marcus loosened his Italian silk tie and walked toward the bar, his handmade Oxford shoes silent against the marble floor. The apartment stretched around him like a museum of wealth. Rare paintings worth more than most people's houses, furniture that belonged in palaces, technology that hadn't even hit the market yet. Everything perfect, everything cold. As he poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a month, movement outside caught his eye. Through the rain-streaked window, down in the small garden area behind his building, he saw a figure huddled beneath a tree that offered little shelter from the downpour. Marcus frowned and moved closer to the window. The figure was small, wearing what looked like a dark coat or jacket, sitting on what appeared to be a small concrete ledge near the service entrance. He'd never paid much attention to the back area of his building before. That was where the maintenance staff and service workers entered, invisible and irrelevant to his daily existence. But something about this person drew his attention. They weren't moving to find better shelter. They weren't running for cover like any sensible person would do in this weather. They were just sitting there, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking through their clothes. His phone buzzed with messages from his various business associates, but Marcus ignored them. He found himself strangely fixated on this figure in the rain. Who would choose to sit outside in weather like this? And why here, behind his building? The whiskey burned pleasantly as it went down, but it did nothing to satisfy his growing curiosity. Marcus set the glass aside and pressed closer to the window, cupping his hands around his eyes to get a better view through the rain and darkness. That's when he realized something that made his stomach tighten unexpectedly. The person wasn't just sitting in the rain. They were eating something. Small, careful movements suggested someone taking modest bites of food, completely unconcerned by the water streaming down their face and clothes. Marcus had grown up with every advantage money could provide. Private schools, summer homes, cars that cost more than houses, and food prepared by world-class chefs. The idea of eating outside in a storm was so foreign to him that he almost couldn't process what he was seeing. Yet there was something about the quiet dignity of this person's posture that struck him as oddly beautiful. Without quite knowing why, he found himself walking toward his coat closet. The rational part of his mind told him to ignore this strange scene and focus on tomorrow's meeting. But something stronger was pulling him toward the service elevator that would take him down to the building's lower level. Minutes later, Marcus stepped through a side door he'd never used before into the rain-soaked garden area. The cold water immediately began soaking through his expensive suit, but he barely noticed. Up close, he could see the figure more clearly now. It was a woman, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair plastered to her head by the rain. She wore a thin coat that had clearly seen better days, and she was indeed eating what looked like a simple sandwich, taking small, measured bites as if savoring each one. Her eyes were closed, and there was an expression of such peaceful contentment on her face that Marcus found himself stopping several feet away, reluctant to disturb this private moment. She must have sensed his presence because her eyes opened suddenly. They were large and dark, framed by wet lashes, and when they met his, Marcus felt something shift inside his chest that he couldn't immediately identify. Surprise flickered across her features, followed quickly by what looked like embarrassment. "Oh," she said softly, starting to stand. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone would be out here. I can move somewhere else." Her voice was gentle, with a slight accent he couldn't place. She clutched the remainder of her sandwich protectively against her chest, and Marcus noticed her hands were slightly trembling, though whether from cold or nervousness he couldn't tell. "No," he heard himself saying, though he hadn't planned to speak at all. "Don't move. I saw you from upstairs and wondered if you were all right." The woman looked up at the towering building behind them, then back at Marcus, and he saw recognition dawn in her eyes. She knew who he was. Most people in the building did, even if he'd never noticed them before. "You're Mr. Wellington," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm Maya. I work for the cleaning service. I clean your office sometimes." Marcus tried to remember if he'd ever seen her before, but realized with some shame that he barely noticed the cleaning staff. They came and went like shadows, making his world pristine while remaining invisible to him. "You work in my office?" he asked, genuinely curious now. Maria nodded, still looking like she wanted to disappear. "Late evenings, usually, after you've left for the day. I hope I haven't done anything wrong." "If there's been a complaint about my work, no," Marcus interrupted, stepping slightly closer. The rain continued to pour down on both of them, but neither seemed inclined to seek shelter now. "No complaints. My office is always perfect in the morning. I just wondered why you're eating out here in the rain." For a moment, Maria looked like she might not answer. She glanced down at the simple sandwich in her hands, then back up at him. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible above the sound of the rain. "I don't really have anywhere else to go right now," she said simply. "My shift doesn't end until 10, and the shelter where I've been staying has a curfew at 9:30. I missed it tonight because I had to finish the floors on the 15th level. Someone had spilled coffee, and it stained. I couldn't leave it like that." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Shelter. She was living in a homeless shelter, and she'd missed curfew because she stayed late to properly clean coffee stains that he probably wouldn't even have noticed. "You're homeless?" he asked, the question coming out more bluntly than he'd intended. Maria's cheeks flushed, visible even in the dim light from the building's security lamps. "It's temporary," she said quickly. "I'm saving money for a deposit on an apartment. I have a job, and I'm working extra shifts whenever I can get them. It's just, it takes time to save enough for first month's rent plus deposit plus all the fees. But I'm getting there." Marcus found himself studying her face in the rain-washed light. There was no self-pity in her expression, no plea for sympathy. She stated her situation as simple fact, the way another person might mention the weather. But underneath that practical exterior, he sensed a deep well of determination and pride that commanded his respect in a way that surprised him. "How long have you been?" he started, then stopped, unsure how to phrase the question tactfully. "Living rough?" "About 3 months," Maria answered, apparently unbothered by his directness. "I was sharing an apartment with 2 other girls, but they both got laid off from their jobs and couldn't make rent. The landlord evicted all of us. I could have called my family back in Mexico, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I came here to make something of myself. Going back would feel like giving up." The rain seemed to be getting heavier, and Marcus noticed that Maria was starting to shiver more noticeably. Her thin coat was completely soaked through, and the sandwich in her hands was getting soggy from the water running down her arms. "Come inside," he said suddenly. "You can't stay out here all night in this weather." Maria's eyes widened with alarm. "Oh no, Mr. Wellington, I couldn't. I don't want to impose, and I'm sure there are rules about employees being in the residential areas of the building. I'll be fine out here. I've been through worse storms than this. I own the building," Marcus said simply. "There are no rules except the ones I make. And I'm making a rule right now that no one eats dinner in a thunderstorm if there's a perfectly good dry space available. He turned and started walking toward the service entrance, then looked back when he realized she wasn't following. Maria stood frozen in place, clutching her sandwich, rainwater streaming down her face. "I promise I'm not trying to take advantage of your kindness," she said. "I just need to wait until the shelter opens its doors again at 6 in the morning. I don't need anything from you, except maybe to sit in the lobby where it's dry." Something in her tone, the careful way she set boundaries, the quiet dignity with which she stated her needs, struck Marcus as profoundly different from how most people interacted with him. In his world, people were always wanting something more than what they asked for. They schemed and maneuvered and played complex games to get close to his money and power. This woman was doing the opposite. She was actively trying to ask for as little as possible. The lobby closes to residents and guests only after 11, Marcus found himself saying. Security would ask you to leave. But there are other options. He pulled out his phone, and for a moment Maria looked alarmed, as if she thought he might be calling security to have her removed. Instead, he pulled up a contact and hit call. "James," Marcus said when the call connected. "It's Marcus Wellington. I need you to prepare the guest suite on the 20th floor." "Yes, tonight." "No, not for a business associate. Someone who needs a place to stay." "That's right, have housekeeping stock it with toiletries, and see if they can find some clean clothes, something comfortable." "No, James, I don't need you to run a background check. Just prepare the room." He ended the call and looked at Maria, who was staring at him with an expression of complete shock. "Mr. Wellington," she whispered, "I can't accept that. I guess the suite? I'm sure that costs more for one night than I make in a week. I was thinking maybe just a chair in a security office or something." "When was the last time you had a hot shower?" Marcus asked quietly. Maria's cheeks reddened again, and she looked down. "It's been a while. The shelter has showers, but they're only available at certain times, and there's usually a long wait." "When was the last time you slept in an actual bed?" She was quiet for a long moment. "About 3 months," she admitted finally. Marcus felt something twist in his chest again, that same unfamiliar sensation he'd experienced upstairs. Here was a woman who worked in his building every day, who ensured his professional world remained spotless and organized, and she'd been sleeping in a shelter and eating sandwiches in the rain while he lived 40 floors above her in luxury. He took completely for granted. "The guest suite has a shower with water pressure that could knock you over," he said, trying to keep his tone light. "Clean towels that get changed every day whether you use them or not. A bed that costs more than most cars. Room service that can bring you anything you want to eat, any time of day or night. All of it is just sitting there empty, waiting for someone who might never come." Maria was shaking her head before he finished speaking. "I can't. It's too much. I don't want you to think I'm trying to manipulate you or use you. I know how rich men can be taken advantage of, and I don't want you to think that I dash. What I think," Marcus interrupted, "is that you're someone who stayed late to properly clean a coffee stain that most people would have ignored, and who's been sleeping in a shelter for 3 months rather than giving up on your dreams. What I think is that if I let you spend the night eating sandwiches in a thunderstorm when I have empty rooms going to waste, I'm a worse person than I thought I was." They stood looking at each other in the rain for several long moments. Marcus could see Maria weighing her options, struggling between pride and practical need. Finally, she took a small step toward him. "Just for tonight," she said quietly, "and I want to pay you something for it. I don't have much, but I can give you $20. That's what I would pay for a motel room, if I could find one that cheap." Marcus almost smiled at that, thinking of how much the guest suite actually cost to maintain per night. But something in Maria's expression told him that accepting her payment, however symbolic, was important to her dignity. "Deal," he said solemnly. $20 for one night. As they walked toward the service entrance together, Marcus found himself thinking about the evening that had started with him staring emptily out his window at the rain. He'd been feeling disconnected from everything, questioning the purpose behind his accumulated wealth and success. Now, walking beside this woman who had somehow maintained her grace and determination despite circumstances that would have broken many people. He felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt useful. The service elevator was small and utilitarian compared to the main elevators that serve the residential floors. As they rode up together in comfortable silence, Marcus found himself stealing glances at Maria's profile. Her dark hair was still wet from the rain, and her clothes clung uncomfortably to her small frame, but there was something compelling about her quiet presence that he couldn't quite define. "Can I ask you something?" he said as they passed the 10th floor. "Of course. Why didn't you just tell me you were homeless when I first approached you outside? Most people would have, hoping for help." Maria considered the question seriously. "Because that's not who I am," she said finally. "I'm not homeless. I'm someone who happens to not have a home right now. There's a difference. I don't want your help because I'm pitiable. If you want to help me, I'd rather it be because you think I'm worth helping." The elevator dinged softly as they reached the 20th floor, but Marcus didn't immediately press the button to open the doors. Maria's words had stirred something in him that he was still trying to understand. "Most people who meet me want something," he said quietly. "Money, business connections, social access, job opportunities. You're the first person I've met in years who seems to actively want less from me, not more." "Maybe that's because I know what it's like to have nothing," Maria replied. "When you have nothing, you learn to appreciate everything. When you have everything," she trailed off, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound presumptuous about your life." "No," Marcus said, pressing the button to open the elevator doors. "I think you're absolutely right." The guest suite was on the corner of the 20th floor, with windows facing both north and east over the city. Marcus had stayed in it himself a few times when his main penthouse was being renovated, and he knew it was more luxurious than most five-star hotels. As he opened the door and switched on the lights, he tried to see it through Maria's eyes. The main room was spacious and elegant, with cream-colored furniture and rich wood accents. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city lights twinkling below them. A large flat-screen television was mounted on one wall, facing a comfortable seating area. Through an open doorway, the bedroom was visible, dominated by a king-sized bed with crisp white linens. The bathroom, Marcus knew, featured a rainfall shower, a soaking tub, and marble countertops stocked with high-end toiletries. Maria stepped inside hesitantly, as if afraid she might break something just by being there. Her wet shoes squeaked slightly on the hardwood floor, and she moved with careful, precise steps toward the center of the room. "This is incredible," she breathed, turning slowly to take in the space. "Are you sure this is okay? I feel like I should have cleaned myself up before coming in here. I'm dripping water on your beautiful floors." "The floors can be cleaned," Marcus said, and immediately realized how that sounded, given that Maria was the one who probably would be cleaning them. "I mean, they're just floors. Don't worry about them." A soft knock at the door interrupted them, and Marcus opened it to find James, the building's concierge, holding several shopping bags. "The items you requested, Mr. Wellington," James said, his professional demeanor not betraying any curiosity about the situation. "I've taken the liberty of including a variety of sizes and styles, as well as basic necessities. Room service is standing by if needed." "Thank you, James. That's all for tonight." After James left, Marcus handed the shopping bags to Maria, who accepted them with an expression of bewilderment. "Clothes?" she asked. "Something dry to wear while your things are being cleaned. And tomorrow you can choose what you'd like to keep and what you'd like to donate." Maria opened one of the bags and pulled out a soft cashmere sweater in deep blue, followed by well-fitted jeans, underwear still in packages, and comfortable-looking slippers. Everything looked expensive and carefully chosen. "Mr. Wellington," she said softly, "this is too much. These clothes probably cost more than I make in 2 months." "Please," Marcus said, and he realized there was something almost pleading in his own voice. "Just please let me do this. I'm not sure why, but it feels important." Maria studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "but I want you to know that I'm not going to forget this kindness. Someday, When I'm in a position to help someone else the way you're helping me tonight, I'm going to do it. That's a promise. Something about the simple sincerity of her words moved Marcus in a way that surprised him. In his world, people made grand gestures and empty promises all the time. But when Maria said she would pay this kindness forward, he believed her completely. I'm going to head back upstairs, he said, suddenly feeling awkward about the intimacy of the situation. You have my number from the phone in the room if you need anything. Room service, extra towels, whatever. Don't hesitate to call. Mr. Wellington? Maria called as he reached the door. Thank you. Not just for the room and the clothes, but for seeing me. I know that sounds strange, but most people look right through me. You actually saw me. Marcus felt that unfamiliar sensation in his chest again, stronger this time. Good night, Maria, he said quietly, and meant it more than he'd meant those words in years. As he rode the elevator back up to his penthouse, Marcus found himself thinking about Maria's parting words. She'd thanked him for seeing her, but the truth was more complicated than that. Tonight, looking into her rain-wet face as she ate her simple sandwich with such quiet dignity, he'd seen something he'd been missing in his own life for years. He'd seen what it looked like to be genuinely grateful for small things. He'd seen what it looked like to maintain hope and determination in the face of genuine hardship. He'd seen what it looked like to care more about character than comfort. Most importantly, he'd seen what it felt like to be needed not for what he could provide, but for who he chose to be. Back in his penthouse, Marcus poured himself another whiskey and returned to his position by the window. The rain was still falling, but now instead of seeming hostile and cold, it seemed cleansing somehow. Down below, the little garden area where he'd first seen Maria was empty now, but he found himself thinking about what tomorrow might bring. For the first time in months, he was actually looking forward to finding out. Marcus woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through his bedroom windows and the unfamiliar sensation of actually wanting to get out of bed. Usually, mornings were a series of automatic motions: coffee, shower, suit, elevator, car, office, but today he found himself wondering if Maria had slept well in the guest suite 20 floors below. The thought made him pause as he reached for his phone to check the usual overnight emails and market reports. When had he last woken up thinking about another person's well-being? When had he last made a decision based on something other than profit margins or strategic advantage? His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked the same as always. Expensive haircut, clean-shaven jaw, eyes the pale blue that his ex-fiancée had once called calculating. But something felt different behind those eyes this morning. Something felt awake. After showering and dressing in his usual immaculate suit, Marcus found himself taking the elevator down to the 20th floor instead of directly to the parking garage. He told himself he was just being a responsible host, checking that his guest had everything she needed. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than that. He wanted to see her again. The hallway outside the guest suite was quiet, with no indication of whether Maria was awake or still sleeping. Marcus raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What was the protocol here? He'd housed homeless people in his building before, usually through organized charity events that his assistant handled, but never so personally. Never someone he'd actually spoken to. Before he could decide what to do, the suite door opened, and Maria appeared in the doorway, as if she'd been waiting for him. She was wearing the jeans and cashmere sweater from the shopping bags, and Marcus was struck by how different she looked: clean and rested and dry. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her skin had a healthy glow that the rain and exhaustion had hidden the night before. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," she said with a smile that seemed to light up the entire hallway. "I hope I didn't oversleep. I wasn't sure what time I should be ready to leave." "You're not oversleeping," Marcus said, then realized he didn't actually know what time checkout was supposed to be since he'd made the arrangement up on the spot. "Did you sleep well?" "Like I was dead to the world," Maria laughed, and the sound was musical and genuine. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to sleep without worrying about someone taking your things or having to wake up every hour to make sure you're safe. And that shower?" She closed her eyes briefly, as if remembering something wonderful. "I think I used up all your hot water." I'm sorry about that. We have plenty of hot water, Marcus assured her. Are you hungry? Room service can bring up whatever you'd like for breakfast. Maria shook her head quickly. Oh no, you've already done too much. I should get going anyway. I have a day shift at another building starting at 9, and I need to stop by the shelter first to let them know I'm okay. They worry when people don't show up. Something about her mention of leaving made Marcus's stomach tighten unexpectedly. What about tonight? He found himself asking. Will you make it back to the shelter in time? I hope so, Maria said, but Marcus caught a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The day job runs until 6, and then I have my evening shift here starting at 7. If I can finish everything by 9:15, I should just make curfew. Marcus did quick math in his head. That was a 14-hour workday, with barely enough time to travel between locations, and all of it hinging on finishing her cleaning duties 15 minutes before the shelter locked its doors. That's a tight schedule, he observed. It's fine, Maria said quickly. I'm used to it, and I'm saving up quickly working double shifts. Maybe another month or two, and I'll have enough for a deposit somewhere. Marcus found himself calculating what a month or two of this schedule would do to her. She was already thin, and the dark circles under her eyes were fading, but still visible. How long could someone maintain this pace before something gave way? Maria, he said slowly, what if I told you there was a better option? Her expression immediately became guarded. What kind of option? A job. A real job with regular hours and steady pay and benefits. Something that would let you save for an apartment without killing yourself in the process. Maria studied his face carefully. What kind of job? She asked again, more cautiously this time. Marcus realized he'd spoken without thinking, offering something he didn't actually have lined up. But as he looked at Maria's hopeful but wary expression, an idea began forming in his mind. I need a personal assistant, he heard himself saying. Someone organized, reliable, discreet. Someone who pays attention to details and takes pride in their work. The pay would be enough to afford a decent apartment, and there would be health insurance and other benefits. It wasn't entirely a lie. Marcus did need a new personal assistant. His current one was moving to London next month for a family situation. But he'd been planning to use a high-end recruitment agency to find someone with an MBA and executive experience. He'd never considered offering the position to someone whose primary qualification was that she cleaned coffee stains thoroughly and ate sandwiches in the rain with dignity. Maria's eyes widened, but her expression remained cautious. Mr. Wellington, I'd appreciate the thought, but I don't have experience as a personal assistant. I'm sure someone in your position needs someone with proper training and education and references. What kind of training? Marcus asked. Answering phones? Managing schedules? Coordinating meetings? Making travel arrangements? I could teach you all of that in a week. But I don't even have a college degree, Maria protested. I had to drop out of school back home to help support my family. I've been working cleaning jobs since I was 16. Some of the most competent people I know never went to college, Marcus said, which was true. And some of the least competent people I know have multiple degrees. Education isn't the same as intelligence or capability. Maria bit her lower lip, clearly torn between hope and skepticism. Can I ask why you would offer me such an opportunity? Yesterday, you didn't even know I existed. It was a fair question, and Marcus found himself struggling to articulate an answer that didn't sound either condescending or crazy. How could he explain that watching her eat in the rain had made him feel more connected to another human being than he'd felt in years? How could he describe the way her quiet dignity had stirred something in him that he'd thought was permanently dormant? I've been looking for someone I could trust, he said finally. Someone who wouldn't take the job just to get close to my money or my connections. Someone who would work hard because that's who they are, not because they're trying to impress me or manipulate me. Last night, I realized I might have found that person. Maria was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her thinking through the implications and possibilities. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What would happen if I wasn't good at it? If I made mistakes or couldn't learn fast enough? Then we'd figure out how to fix the mistakes and adjust the learning curve, Marcus said simply. I'm not looking for perfection, Maria. I'm looking for someone who cares about doing their best. And if it didn't work out at all, Marcus considered the question seriously. Then, I'd help you find something else that was a better fit. Either way, you'd never have to go back to sleeping in shelters or eating dinner in thunderstorms. The promise seemed to hang in the air between them, and Marcus realized he meant it more completely than he'd meant anything in a long time. Whatever happened with the job situation, he wouldn't let Maria slip back into the precarious existence he'd found her in. I want to start at the bottom, Maria said suddenly. Not as your personal assistant right away. Maybe as an assistant to your assistant, or in the filing department, or answering basic phone calls. I want to earn the position, not just be given it. Marcus felt a smile tug at the corners of his mouth. Even when offered a dramatic improvement in her circumstances, Maria's instinct was to ask for less rather than more. It was the opposite of how almost everyone else in his world operated. We can structure it however makes you most comfortable, he said. But I want you to consider something. You've already earned this opportunity. You earned it by staying late to clean coffee stains properly when no one would have known the difference. You earned it by maintaining your dignity and determination despite sleeping in a shelter for 3 months. You earned it by caring more about my opinion of your character than about what I could do for you financially. Maria's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. Mr. Wellington, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Is this offer about helping me, or is it about you feeling guilty about having so much when other people have so little? Because if it's guilt, the feeling will pass, and then where does that leave me? The directness of the question caught Marcus off guard. Once again, Maria had cut straight through social niceties to the heart of something real and important. He thought carefully before answering. I think it started as guilt, he admitted, but that's not what it is now. Now it's about recognizing that I've been surrounded by people who want things from me for so long that I've forgotten what it felt like to meet someone who could actually give me something I needed. What do you need? Maria asked quietly. Marcus looked into her dark eyes, trying to find words for something he was only beginning to understand himself. I need to remember what it feels like to matter to someone for reasons that have nothing to do with my bank account, he said finally. I need to be around someone who sees the world as full of possibilities instead of obstacles. I need to work with someone who takes pride in doing things right instead of just doing them quickly or cheaply. He paused, then added more softly, I need to be reminded what it looks like when someone doesn't take good things for granted. Maria was quiet for several moments, studying his face with an intensity that made Marcus feel exposed in a way that was both uncomfortable and strangely welcome. Okay, she said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. I want a contract that spells out exactly what my job duties are and what happens if either of us wants to end the arrangement. I want to know that I'm not just your charity project, but an actual employee with real responsibilities and expectations. Marcus nodded. That's reasonable and smart. I want to continue living in my own place once I save enough for an apartment. I don't want to be dependent on your housing or feel like I owe you for things outside of work. Understood. And I want you to promise that if this doesn't work out professionally, it won't affect how you treat me as a person. I don't want to go from someone you respect to someone you see as a failure or a disappointment. The third condition hit Marcus harder than the first two. The fact that Maria was already thinking about protecting her dignity in case of failure spoke volumes about how carefully she'd learned to guard her heart and her self-worth. I promise, he said solemnly. But, Maria, I want you to promise me something too. What? Promise me that you'll ask for what you need and speak up if something isn't working. I've never had an employee who started from your situation, so I'm going to need you to tell me if I'm making assumptions or if I'm handling something in a way that doesn't work for you. Maria smiled, and Marcus realized it was the first completely unguarded expression he'd seen from her. I can do that, she said. I'm pretty good at speaking my mind when I need to. Good, Marcus said, and found himself smiling back. So, when can you start? Is next Monday too soon? Maria asked. I need to give proper notice at my cleaning jobs, and I want to find an apartment this weekend, so I'm not staying at the shelter while working for you. That doesn't feel right. Marcus almost offered to help with the apartment search, then caught himself. Maria had been clear about maintaining her independence, and he suspected she needed to accomplish some things on her own in order to feel truly ready for this new chapter. Monday is perfect, he said instead. My office manager will have all the paperwork ready, and we can spend the first few days going over procedures and getting you set up with everything you'll need. As they rode the elevator down together toward the parking garage, Marcus found himself thinking about how much his life had changed in the space of 12 hours. Yesterday morning, he'd been Marcus Wellington, billionaire businessman, isolated in his tower and disconnected from anything that felt meaningful or real. Today, he was Marcus Wellington, billionaire businessman who was looking forward to Monday morning for the first time in months. Mr. Wellington, Maria said as they reached the parking level. Marcus, he corrected gently. If we're going to be working together, you should call me Marcus. Marcus, she repeated as if testing how it felt. Thank you for seeing me, for helping me, for believing I can do this job, even when I'm not sure I believe it myself. Thank you for letting me help, Marcus replied, and for reminding me that some of the most important things in life are things you can't buy. As they parted ways in the parking garage, Marcus heading to his office, Maria heading to her day job, Marcus found himself thinking about the evening ahead. For months, he'd been dreading the end of each workday, faced with the prospect of returning to his empty penthouse and his solitary dinner, and his growing sense that all his success was somehow meaningless. Tonight, he would go home knowing that someone he cared about was safe and warm and hopeful about the future. Tomorrow, he would go to work knowing that Monday would bring something new and challenging and personally meaningful into his carefully ordered professional life. It was, Marcus realized, the first time in years that he felt genuinely excited about what came next. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies, as if the weather itself was celebrating new beginnings. Marcus found himself arriving at his office earlier than usual, something his staff noticed but politely didn't comment on. He'd spent the weekend thinking about how to structure Maria's integration into his professional world, but more than that, he'd spent it looking forward to seeing her again. His current assistant, Jennifer, had been briefed on the situation with characteristic professionalism. She'd prepared training materials, set up a workspace, and arranged for all necessary security clearances and documentation without asking probing questions about Marcus's unconventional hiring decision. It was one of the things he appreciated most about Jennifer, her ability to adapt to unusual circumstances with seamless efficiency. She'll be working at the desk outside your office for the first week, Jennifer explained as they reviewed the day's schedule. Close enough for easy communication and questions, but with her own computer and phone line. I prepared basic orientation materials and an overview of your typical daily, weekly, and monthly routines. Marcus nodded, though he found himself distracted by watching the elevator bank through his office's glass walls. Maria was supposed to arrive at 8:30, and it was currently 8:25. At exactly 8:30, the elevator doors opened, and Maria stepped out, looking professional but nervous in a navy blue dress that Marcus recognized from the shopping bags he'd provided Friday night. She'd styled her hair simply and carried a notepad and pen, looking every inch the competent assistant despite her admitted lack of experience. "Good morning," Marcus said, greeting her at his office door. "How was your weekend?" "Productive," Maria replied with a smile that seemed to brighten the entire office. "I found an apartment. It's small, but it's mine, and I can move in on Wednesday. Thank you for the advance on my salary. It made all the difference in convincing the landlord to rent to me." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at her obvious happiness. The salary advance had been Jennifer's suggestion, a standard practice for new employees who needed to cover moving costs. But seeing what it meant to Maria reminded him how dramatically her life was changing. "I'm glad it worked out," he said. "Are you ready to jump in?" "I think so," Maria said, though Marcus caught a flicker of nervousness in her expression. "I have to admit, I'm a little intimidated. Your world moves pretty fast." Everyone's intimidated on their first day, Marcus assured her. Even people with years of experience. The important thing is asking questions when you need to and not pretending to understand something when you don't. Jennifer appeared at Marcus's elbow with perfect timing, extending a welcoming smile to Maria. You must be Maria. I'm Jennifer, and I'll be training you for the next 2 weeks before I transfer to London. Shall we get started with your orientation? As Marcus watched Jennifer lead Maria to her new workspace, he felt a surge of pride mixed with protectiveness. Maria looked small among the glass and steel and expensive technology of his office environment, but there was a determined set to her shoulders that reminded him of the woman he'd found eating dinner in the rain. The morning proceeded better than Marcus had dared hope. Through his office's glass walls, he could see Maria taking notes as Jennifer explained various systems and procedures. She asked thoughtful questions and seemed to pick up new concepts quickly. Most importantly, she maintained the same quiet professionalism that had impressed him from their first conversation. Around 10:30, Marcus's phone rang with a call from a particularly difficult client. The conversation quickly devolved into the kind of aggressive negotiation that made his jaw clench and his temper rise. As he wrapped up the call with forced politeness, he noticed Maria standing hesitantly in his doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly. "Jennifer said you might want coffee after difficult calls, and that one sounded pretty challenging." In her hands was a cup of coffee prepared exactly the way he liked it. Information that would have been in the notes Jennifer prepared, but Maria had clearly paid attention and remembered. More than that, she noticed his stress level and responded to it without being asked. "Thank you," Marcus said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "You're right, that was challenging. Richard Morrison is one of our biggest clients, but he's also one of the most demanding people I've ever dealt with." "What makes him so difficult?" Maria asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, that's probably not appropriate for me to ask. I don't need to know about your client relationships." "Actually," Marcus said, settling back in his chair, "it is appropriate. Part of your job will be managing my calendar and communications, which means understanding the personalities and situations involved. Richard Morrison owns a chain of luxury hotels, and he's convinced that because he pays us a lot of money, he's entitled to demand the impossible on unreasonable timelines." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Is he worth the stress he causes?" It was such a direct question that Marcus almost laughed. Most of his employees, even Jennifer, would have expressed sympathy or offered to help manage the difficult client. Maria had cut straight to the business logic underneath the frustration. "That's exactly the right question," Marcus said. "And honestly, I'm not sure anymore. The revenue is significant, but the time and energy it takes to manage his demands might be better spent on 3 smaller clients who are less demanding. Maybe you could calculate the hourly rate you're actually earning from his account," Maria suggested. "Factor in all the extra time and stress costs, then compare it to your other clients. Numbers don't lie about whether someone is really worth it." Marcus stared at her for a moment, struck by the simple wisdom of the suggestion. It was the kind of clear-eyed analysis he applied to other business decisions, but somehow he'd never thought to apply the same logic to Morrison's account. "That's brilliant," he said finally. "Can you put together a spreadsheet tracking time spent on Morrison's projects versus revenue generated? Include my time, Jennifer's time, and any other staff resources that get pulled into his demands." Maria's face lit up with obvious pleasure at being given a real analytical task. "I can do that. Should I go back through the last 6 months of records to get a solid baseline?" "Perfect. And Maria, this is exactly the kind of thinking I was hoping for when I offered you this position. You see situations differently because you come at them from a different angle than people who've only worked in corporate environments." As Maria headed back to her desk to begin the analysis, Marcus found himself thinking about what she'd said. Numbers don't lie. It was such a simple concept, but Maria had applied it to a problem he'd been struggling with for months without realizing there was a straightforward way to evaluate it. The rest of the morning passed smoothly, with Maria handling basic phone calls and scheduling tasks while working on the Morrison analysis. Marcus found himself checking on her progress more frequently than necessary, not because he doubted her capabilities, but because he enjoyed watching her tackle new challenges with focused determination. Around noon, his phone rang with a call from his ex-fiancée, Cassandra. They'd broken up 6 months ago when Marcus realized that their relationship was more about social compatibility and shared business interests than any genuine emotional connection. The breakup had been civilized but cold, and her subsequent calls always left him feeling vaguely depressed. "Marcus, darling," Cassandra's voice purred through the phone. "I hope you're well. I wanted to let you know I'll be in town next week for the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. I assume you're attending." "I haven't decided yet," Marcus said honestly. He'd been avoiding most social events lately, finding them increasingly tedious and meaningless. "You should come," Cassandra continued. "It would be good for you to be seen at these things, and I know several people who would love to reconnect with you. Besides, I have some exciting news to share about my new gallery project. I think you'd find it very interesting from an investment perspective." There was the real reason for the call. Cassandra was looking for investors, and she was using their past relationship and social obligations to create an opening for her pitch. It was exactly the kind of manipulation Marcus had grown weary of in his previous life. "I'll think about it," he said noncommittally. After ending the call, Marcus found himself comparing it to his interactions with Maria. Cassandra's call had been full of implied obligations, social pressures, and hidden agendas. Every word had been calculated for maximum persuasive effect. In contrast, Maria asked direct questions, gave straightforward answers, and seemed completely unconcerned with managing his impression of her. The difference was like breathing fresh air after being in a stuffy room. "Excuse me, Marcus?" Maria appeared in his doorway again, this time holding a printed spreadsheet. "I finished the preliminary analysis on the Morrison account." Marcus gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk, noting how she moved with unconscious grace despite her obvious nervousness about presenting her first real work product. "What did you find?" he asked. Maria consulted her notes, her expression serious and professional. Looking at the last 6 months, the Morrison account generated $847,000 in revenue. "That sounds impressive until you factor in the time costs. Between your direct time, Jennifer's time, and other staff resources, the account consumed 312 billable hours." She paused, checking her calculations. "That works out to about $2,700 per hour, which initially seems very good. But when I compared it to your other top 5 clients, the average rate is $3,400 per hour, and none of them require nearly as much crisis management or off-hours communication." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for the thoroughness of her analysis. "So Morrison is actually one of our least efficient clients despite the high total revenue." "Exactly. And there's another factor I noticed," Maria continued, gaining confidence. "The Morrison projects seem to create ripple effects that impact other client work. I found several instances where deadlines were missed or quality suffered on other accounts because resources were diverted to handle Morrison emergencies. Can you quantify that impact?" "Not precisely without more research, but I identified at least $200,000 in lost revenue from delayed projects, and one client who switched to a competitor after a deadline was missed due to Morrison-related delays." Marcus leaned back in his chair, impressed not just by Maria's analytical skills, but by her instinct to look beyond the obvious numbers to hidden costs and consequences. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking he'd been hoping to find in his next assistant. "This is excellent work," he said. "Based on this analysis, what would you recommend?" Maria hesitated, clearly uncertain whether she should be making strategic recommendations on her first day. "I don't want to overstep." "You're not overstepping. I'm asking for your opinion. I think you should meet with Morrison and explain that going forward, emergency requests will incur premium pricing, maybe double your usual hourly rate. Either he'll agree to pay for the extra service he's demanding, or he'll learn to plan better and reduce the crisis calls. If he's not willing to do either, then you'll know the account isn't worth keeping." It was a bold recommendation, the kind of tough business decision that Marcus knew was right, but had been avoiding because it felt easier to maintain the status quo. Coming from Maria, who had no corporate experience but possessed clear logical thinking, it carried extra weight. "You realize that approach might cost us the account entirely?" Marcus said. "Yes, but based on these numbers, losing Morrison might actually improve your overall profitability and definitely improve your quality of life. Sometimes the most expensive client is the one who prevents you from serving better clients properly." Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. "Set up a meeting with Morrison for this week. I'm going to present exactly the recommendation you just made." Maria's eyes widened. "Really? Based on my analysis?" "Based on your analysis and your recommendation. You've identified a problem that's been bothering me for months and provided a clear solution. That's exactly what good business analysis should do." As Maria returned to her desk with obvious satisfaction, Marcus found himself thinking about how different this felt from his usual business decisions. Typically, he relied on data prepared by analysts with MBAs and years of experience. But Maria's fresh perspective and logical approach had cut through the complexity to reveal something that more experienced people had missed or been too cautious to suggest. The afternoon brought a series of routine meetings and calls, giving Marcus opportunities to observe how Maria handled various aspects of the assistant role. She managed his calendar efficiently, screened calls with appropriate judgment, and took detailed notes during meetings without seeming intrusive or overwhelming. More importantly, she seemed to understand intuitively when he needed information, coffee, or simply a few minutes of quiet time to process a difficult conversation. It was the kind of professional intuition that usually took months or years to develop, but Maria displayed it naturally. As the day wound toward 5 o'clock, Marcus realized he was feeling something he hadn't experienced in his office environment for a very long time: genuine satisfaction. Not the fleeting pleasure of closing a profitable deal or outmaneuvering a competitor, but the deeper satisfaction that came from working with someone whose presence made the work itself more meaningful. "Maria," he called as she began organizing her desk for the end of the day. "How did today feel?" Honestly, she considered the question seriously, as she seemed to consider everything. "Challenging, but good," she said finally. "I have a lot to learn, but I feel like I can actually do this job. And I feel like I'm contributing something valuable, not just filling space or going through motions." "You are contributing something valuable," Marcus assured her. The Morrison analysis alone was worth more than most consultants charge for a week of work. "Can I ask you something?" Maria said, echoing the question she'd asked several times over their brief acquaintance. "Always. Why did you really offer me this job? I've been thinking about it all day, and I keep coming back to the feeling that there's something you're not telling me about your motivations." Marcus considered deflecting the question, but Maria's directness seemed to call for equal honesty from him. "Because you made me remember what it felt like to care about something other than profit margins and market share," he said. "I've been successful for so long that I'd forgotten why success was supposed to matter. Working with you today reminded me that the best parts of business are about solving problems and helping people accomplish things they couldn't accomplish alone." Maria nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she'd suspected. "Thank you for being honest. I needed to know that this was about more than charity or guilt. It's about recognition," Marcus said. "I recognize something in you that I wanted to be around, and I hope you'll recognize something in me that makes this partnership worthwhile for both of us." As they left the office together that evening, Marcus found himself looking forward to tomorrow in a way he hadn't anticipated. The work would be challenging, the learning curve steep, and there would undoubtedly be difficulties as they figured out how to work together effectively. But for the first time in longer than he cared to admit, Marcus Wellington felt like he was building something meaningful rather than just accumulating something valuable. And that difference he was beginning to understand might be the most important discovery of his adult life. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood at his office window watching the morning sun cast long shadows across the city below, but his attention was focused on the sound of Maria's voice as she handled a difficult call from a demanding vendor. Her tone remained professional and patient despite the caller's obvious frustration, and Marcus found himself admiring how she developed her own style of managing challenging personalities. "Mr. Peterson, I understand your concern about the delayed payment," Maria was saying. "Let me pull up your account and see exactly where we are in the approval process. I see that the invoice was received last Tuesday and is currently in final review. I can have accounting prioritize it and get you a payment confirmation by tomorrow afternoon. Would that work for your schedule?" Marcus smiled to himself, recognizing Maria's talent for turning confrontational calls into collaborative problem-solving sessions. In just 3 weeks, she'd become indispensable not just as an assistant, but as a buffer between him and the kinds of routine conflicts that used to drain his energy throughout the day. The Morrison situation had resolved exactly as Maria predicted. When Marcus presented the premium pricing structure for emergency requests, Morrison had blustered and threatened to take his business elsewhere. Marcus had politely provided referrals to 3 competing firms and wished him well. Within a week, Morrison had called back, agreeing to both the premium pricing and better advance planning for his projects. "You were right about numbers not lying," Marcus had told Maria after Morrison's capitulation. "And you were right that sometimes losing a client is the best business decision." Now, as Maria finished her call and began updating the vendor payment tracker she'd created to prevent future conflicts, Marcus found himself thinking about how much had changed since that rainy night 3 weeks ago. His office ran more smoothly, his stress level had decreased noticeably, and he looked forward to coming to work in ways he'd forgotten were possible. But the changes weren't just professional. Having Maria's presence in his daily routine had made him more aware of the isolation he'd been living in. Her obvious enjoyment of simple pleasures, good coffee, successfully solving a problem, the view of the city from their office windows, reminded him of aspects of life he'd been taking for granted. "Marcus," Maria's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I have Richard Morrison online too. He says it's urgent, but his tone suggests it's more important than emergency level." Marcus chuckled at Maria's careful distinction. She developed a sophisticated understanding of their various clients' communication styles, learning to interpret not just what people said, but how they said it. "Put him through," Marcus said, settling behind his desk. "Marcus, my friend," Morrison's voice boomed through the phone with suspicious cheerfulness. "I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm calling with some exciting news that I think will interest you greatly." "I'm listening," Marcus said, while Maria appeared in his doorway with a cup of coffee and the Morrison account file, anticipating that he might need reference materials. "I've just closed on a property acquisition that's going to require significant development work," Morrison continued. "A boutique hotel in downtown Seattle, prime location, tremendous potential. I'd like Wellington Industries to handle the entire project, acquisition financing, development planning, construction management, everything." It was the kind of large, comprehensive project that Marcus would normally find exciting. The potential revenue was substantial, and the scope would showcase Wellington Industries' capabilities across multiple service areas. But Marcus found himself thinking about Maria's analysis and the stress costs of working with Morrison. "What's your timeline?" he asked. "Well, that's the beautiful thing," Morrison said, his enthusiasm reaching new heights. "The property closes in 6 weeks, and I need to begin renovations immediately to capture the summer tourist season. I know it's ambitious, but I have complete confidence in your team's abilities." 6 weeks. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he calculated what it would take to put together acquisition financing, architectural plans, contractor negotiations, and permitting applications in 6 weeks. It would require pulling resources from other projects, working nights and weekends, and probably missing deadlines elsewhere. "Richard," Marcus said carefully, "a project of this scope typically requires 3 to 4 months of planning and preparation. 6 weeks is possible, but it would require premium emergency pricing across all services." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Emergency pricing?" "Marcus, we've been working together for years. I thought our relationship had earned me some consideration on pricing flexibility." Marcus glanced at Maria, who was taking notes, but maintaining a carefully neutral expression. He thought about their conversation 3 weeks ago, about numbers not lying, and about the cost of clients who demanded the impossible. Our relationship is exactly why I want to be transparent about what this timeline will require, Marcus said. I can deliver what you need in 6 weeks, but it will cost significantly more than our standard rates, and it will impact our ability to serve other clients at the same level. If you can extend the timeline to 3 months, we can work within our normal pricing structure. I can't extend the timeline, Morrison said, his tone becoming less friendly. This is a competitive market situation, and timing is crucial. I thought you understood that successful business sometimes requires sacrifice and flexibility. The word sacrifice struck Marcus oddly. Morrison was asking Marcus and his team to sacrifice their time, their other commitments, and their work-life balance, but he didn't seem prepared to sacrifice anything himself. Not money, not timeline flexibility, not realistic expectations. I understand competitive pressures, Marcus replied. I also understand sustainable business practices. I can give you exceptional service in 6 weeks at premium pricing or excellent service in 12 weeks at standard pricing. Those are the options that allow me to maintain the quality standards you expect. Another pause, longer this time. When Morrison spoke again, his voice carried an edge that Marcus recognized as a precursor to threats and ultimatums. I am disappointed, Marcus. I expected more from our partnership. Perhaps I should explore other firms that are more committed to accommodating their clients' needs. A few months ago, the threat would have caused Marcus to reconsider his position, worried about losing a major client and the revenue associated with the account. But now, with Maria's analysis fresh in his mind and a clearer understanding of what Morrison's business actually cost, Marcus felt oddly calm. I understand your disappointment, Marcus said. If you decide to work with another firm, I'll be happy to provide references and transfer any preliminary work we've done. If you decide to proceed with us under either of the options I outlined, we'll deliver the exceptional results you're used to. The call ended with Morrison saying he needed to consider his options, which Marcus interpreted as shopping around for a firm desperate enough to accept an impossible timeline at standard pricing. As he hung up the phone, he realized he felt relieved rather than concerned. How do you think that went? Maria asked, settling into the chair across from his desk with her notepad. I think Morrison is going to find out that other firms will either charge him more than our premium pricing or deliver lower quality than he's used to, Marcus said. And I think we're going to be better off focusing on clients who understand that good work requires reasonable timelines. Maria smiled, and Marcus noticed how much more confident she'd become over the past few weeks. I'm proud of you for sticking to your standards, she said. It would have been easy to give in to his pressure, especially since he's been such a big client. I learned from a very smart analyst, Marcus said, that sometimes the most expensive client is the one who prevents you from serving better clients properly. That analyst sounds brilliant, Maria replied with mock seriousness. You should give her a raise. Marcus found himself laughing, something that had been happening more frequently since Maria joined his team. Her sense of humor was subtle and warm, and she had a talent for lightening tense moments without minimizing their importance. Actually, he said, I've been thinking about your compensation structure. You're performing well above the level we originally discussed, and your contributions are adding significant value to our operations. Maria's expression immediately became more serious. I appreciate that, but I want to earn any increases based on measurable results, not just your general satisfaction. What metrics are you using to evaluate my performance? It was such a perfectly Maria response, direct, practical, and focused on fairness rather than just personal benefit. Marcus realized he'd been preparing for this conversation without fully knowing it, observing her work and cataloging the ways her presence had improved his business operations. Client satisfaction is up measurably, he said, consulting notes he'd been keeping. Call resolution time has improved by an average of 12 minutes per interaction. The vendor payment tracking system you implemented has eliminated late fees and early payment discounts, saving us about $3,000 per month. And the client profitability analysis approach you developed for Morrison is something I want to implement across all major accounts. Maria listened carefully, occasionally making notes. Those are good metrics, she said when he finished. What about areas where I need improvement? Marcus had to think about that question. In 3 weeks, Maria had exceeded his expectations in almost every area. She learned quickly, communicated clearly, handled difficult personalities with patience and skill, and brought creative problem-solving approaches to routine challenges. You need to become more comfortable making decisions without checking with me first, he said finally. You have good judgment, and there are many situations where I'd rather have you make the call and tell me about it afterward than wait for my approval. That's hard for me, Maria admitted. I'm still learning what level of decision-making authority you're comfortable delegating, and I don't want to overstep or create problems by acting beyond my role. I understand the caution, but I hired you because I trust your judgment. I'd rather deal with occasional mistakes made by someone exercising reasonable judgment than micromanage every decision. Marcus pulled out a document he'd been working on and handed it to Maria. I've drafted an expanded job description that includes more decision-making authority and additional responsibilities. Take a look and let me know if anything seems unreasonable or unclear. As Maria reviewed the document, Marcus watched her expression change from concentration to surprise to something approaching excitement. He'd been conservative in the original job description, not wanting to overwhelm her with too much responsibility too quickly. But her performance had convinced him that she was ready for challenges he hadn't originally planned to delegate. This includes budget authority up to $10,000 for vendor contracts, Maria said, looking up from the document, and approval authority for standard client service requests. Are you sure you want to give me that much autonomy? I'm sure, Marcus said. But more importantly, are you comfortable taking on that level of responsibility? Maria studied the document for another moment, then looked directly at him with the clear-eyed confidence he'd come to associate with her best decisions. Yes, she said simply. I'm ready for this. As they spent the next hour going over the expanded responsibilities and decision-making protocols, Marcus found himself thinking about how different this conversation was from similar discussions he'd had with other employees. Most people either asked for more authority than they were ready to handle, or shied away from responsibility that would advance their careers. Maria approached the expansion of her role the same way she approached everything else, thoughtfully, practically, and with careful attention to what would actually serve the business best. She asked good questions about boundaries and expectations, but she didn't seem intimidated by the increased scope of her position. There's one more thing I want to discuss, Marcus said as they wrapped up the formal review. I know you've been focused on saving money for a larger apartment, but I want you to consider a different kind of investment in your future. Maria's expression became cautious, as it always did when Marcus brought up topics that might involve charity or special treatment. What kind of investment? Education, Marcus said. You have natural analytical and management skills, but formal business training would give you tools and credentials that could open up even more opportunities. I'd like to pay for you to take evening MBA classes, if that's something you're interested in. An MBA? Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus, that's incredibly generous, but I can't accept that kind of gift. Graduate school costs tens of thousands of dollars. It's not a gift, Marcus corrected. It's a business investment. You're already performing at a level that justifies advanced training, and the education would benefit both of us. You'd gain credentials and knowledge that would advance your career, and I'd have an assistant with formal business education complementing her natural abilities. Maria was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the offer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the same careful boundaries Marcus had come to expect from her. If you're serious about this, I want it structured as a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back over time, with interest, and I want a written agreement that spells out exactly what obligations, if any, come with accepting this educational funding. You don't trust me? Marcus asked, though he was smiling as he said it. I trust you completely, Maria replied. But I don't trust complicated financial arrangements that aren't clearly defined. I've learned that good intentions can become complicated situations if expectations aren't spelled out in advance. It was another example of Maria's practical wisdom, the life experience that complemented her natural intelligence in ways that formal education alone couldn't provide. She learned to protect herself and her interests without becoming cynical or closed off to genuine opportunities. That's exactly the right approach, Marcus said. I'll have our legal department draw up a formal educational loan agreement with standard terms and clear expectations. You can review it and decide whether it's something you want to pursue. As they concluded their meeting and returned to the day's regular business, Marcus found himself thinking about the future in ways he hadn't for years. Maria's presence in his professional life had reminded him that business could be about building something meaningful rather than just accumulating wealth. Her growth and development had become genuinely important to him, not just as an employer, but as someone who cared about her success and happiness. For the first time since he'd inherited his father's business empire, Marcus Wellington felt like he was creating something rather than just managing it. And that feeling, he was beginning to understand, was worth more than any profit margin he'd ever achieved. The afternoon brought a call that would test both Marcus's newfound perspective and Maria's expanded authority in ways neither of them anticipated. But as Marcus watched Maria handle a complex client emergency with calm competence, he felt confident that whatever challenges came next, they would face them as a team that had learned to trust each other's judgment and capabilities. The rain that had brought them together 3 weeks ago felt like a lifetime ago, but Marcus sometimes stood at his office window in the evenings and remembered the moment when he'd seen Maria eating her simple dinner with such quiet dignity. That moment had changed both of their lives in ways that were still unfolding, and Marcus had never been more grateful for a decision to follow his instincts instead of his usual calculated caution. 6 months had passed since that transformative night in the rain, and the changes in both Marcus and Maria's lives had exceeded even their most optimistic expectations. Maria had not only mastered her role as Marcus's assistant, but had become his most trusted advisor, her insights shaping major business decisions and her judgment proving invaluable across multiple aspects of his operations. The educational loan arrangement had worked exactly as structured, with Maria excelling in her evening MBA program while maintaining her daytime responsibilities. Her professors frequently commented on her unique perspective, the way she combined theoretical business concepts with practical real-world experience that many of her classmates lacked. Marcus found himself looking forward not just to their daily work interactions, but to the conversations they had about her coursework, the ideas she brought from her classes, and the way she connected academic theories to their actual business challenges. Their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper, a mutual respect and understanding that transcended the typical employer-employee relationship. On this particular Thursday morning, Marcus arrived at the office to find Maria already at her desk, reviewing what appeared to be financial projections with unusual intensity. She was wearing a navy blue suit that she'd bought with her first significant raise, and her hair was styled more formally than usual. Something about her demeanor suggested that this wasn't a typical day. "Good morning," Marcus said, noting the papers spread across her workspace. "You're here early, even for you." Maria looked up with an expression that mixed excitement with nervousness. "Good morning. I wanted to get here before you arrived because I have something important to discuss, and I didn't want to interrupt your regular schedule." Marcus felt a flutter of concern. In their 6 months of working together, Maria had never seemed nervous about bringing up professional topics. Her confidence had grown steadily, and she typically approached even sensitive subjects with characteristic directness. "Is everything all right?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her desk rather than retreating to his office. "Everything is fine," Maria assured him quickly. "Actually, everything is better than fine. But I need to talk to you about my future here and about some opportunities I've been considering." The word opportunities sent a small chill through Marcus's chest. He'd been so focused on Maria's growth within his organization that he hadn't really considered the possibility that her expanding skills and credentials might lead her to consider other positions elsewhere. "What kind of opportunities?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral despite the concern building inside him. Maria took a deep breath, arranging the papers in front of her with careful precision. "3 different companies have approached me about executive assistant positions, all with significantly higher salaries than what I'm earning now. One of them is offering nearly double my current compensation, plus better benefits and equity participation." Marcus felt his heart sink, though he tried to keep his expression professionally supportive. Of course, other companies would recognize Maria's value. She'd transformed his operations, demonstrated exceptional analytical capabilities, and earned an MBA from a prestigious program. She was exactly the kind of talented, credentialed professional that every successful business wanted to hire. That's wonderful," he managed to say. "You've earned those opportunities through your hard work and capabilities. Any of those companies would be lucky to have you." Maria studied his face carefully, and Marcus realized she was reading his expression the same way she read client communications, looking beyond the surface words to understand the underlying emotions. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I'm not telling you about these offers because I want to leave. I'm telling you because I want to stay, but I need to know that staying here represents the best decision for my career advancement, not just the most comfortable choice." Relief flooded through Marcus so powerfully that he had to pause a moment before responding. "What would make staying here the best decision for your career advancement?" Maria consulted her notes, her expression becoming more businesslike. "I've been thinking about this for several weeks, and I have a proposal that could benefit both of us. But it's a significant change from how we currently structure our working relationship." "I'm listening." "I want to transition from being your assistant to being your business partner," Maria said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Not an equal partner. I understand that I don't have the capital investment or experience to justify that level of partnership. But I want a stake in the business I'm helping to build, and I want decision-making authority that reflects my actual contributions." Marcus felt his eyebrows rise in surprise. In 6 months, Maria had gone from a homeless woman eating sandwiches in the rain to someone proposing a business partnership with one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. The audacity of it should have seemed presumptuous, but coming from Maria, it felt like the logical next step in a progression that had been building from their first conversation. "What kind of partnership structure are you envisioning?" Marcus asked. Maria pulled out a detailed business plan that she'd clearly spent considerable time preparing. "I've researched comparable arrangements in similar companies, and I've identified 3 areas where I could take on expanded responsibilities that would justify partnership consideration." She opened to the first section of her proposal. "First, client relationship management. I've been tracking client satisfaction and retention rates since I started working here, and both have improved significantly. I want to formalize that role, becoming the primary point of contact for day-to-day client relationships while you focus on strategy and new business development." Marcus nodded, recognizing that Maria had indeed become the person most of their clients preferred to work with for routine matters. Her combination of competence and warmth had made her popular with even their most difficult accounts. Second, operational efficiency optimization. The systems and processes I've implemented have saved the company an average of $15,000 per month in direct costs, plus immeasurable time savings and stress reduction. I want to expand that work across all departments, basically becoming your chief operating officer. The numbers were accurate, Marcus knew. Maria's improvements had indeed generated substantial savings and efficiency gains. The idea of giving her authority to implement similar improvements company-wide was appealing, though it would represent a significant expansion of her role. Third, business development and analysis. My MBA coursework has given me tools to evaluate potential acquisitions, new market opportunities, and strategic partnerships. I want to take the lead on identifying and analyzing growth opportunities, basically becoming your director of strategic planning. Marcus studied the detailed financial projections and organizational charts Maria had prepared. The proposal was thorough, well-researched, and realistic about both opportunities and challenges. More importantly, it represented a logical evolution of their working relationship based on demonstrated capabilities rather than wishful thinking. "What kind of partnership percentage are you thinking?" he asked. 5% equity stake, with the possibility of earning up to 10% based on performance benchmarks over the next 3 years, Maria replied. "I know that might sound modest compared to what some partners receive, but I want to earn my stake rather than just being given it." 5% of Wellington Industries was worth several $1,000,000, a fact that Marcus was certain Maria understood. Yet she was approaching the negotiation with the same careful pragmatism she brought to everything else. "And what about your educational loan?" Marcus asked. "I want to accelerate the repayment schedule," Maria said. "If we move forward with this partnership arrangement, I'll pay off the remaining balance within 6 months rather than the original 3-year timeline. I don't want any financial obligations between us that might complicate the partnership dynamic." Marcus found himself smiling at Maria's attention to relationship dynamics and potential conflicts of interest. She'd learned to think several moves ahead, anticipating complications and addressing them proactively. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into this proposal," he said. "But I have to ask, what happens if I say no? Are you going to accept one of those other job offers?" Maria met his eyes directly, and Marcus saw the same quiet determination that had impressed him from their first meeting. "If you say no, I'll know that you see me as a valuable employee, but not as someone capable of true partnership. That would tell me something important about my long-term prospects here. And yes, I'd probably explore other opportunities. And if I say yes, if you say yes, you get a partner who's completely invested in this company's success, someone who understands your vision and shares your commitment to building something meaningful rather than just profitable." Marcus realized that Maria had presented him with more than just a business proposal. She'd articulated a choice between 2 different futures, one where she remained a highly capable but ultimately replaceable employee, and one where she became an integral part of building his company's next phase of growth. The decision, when he really thought about it, wasn't difficult at all. "I need to have our lawyers review the details and make sure we structure everything properly," Marcus said. "But in principle, I think this partnership makes sense for both of us." Maria's professional composure cracked for just a moment, and Marcus saw a flash of pure joy cross her features before she composed herself again. "Really? You're willing to consider it seriously?" "I'm willing to do more than consider it," Marcus said. "I think you've identified exactly the kind of arrangement that could take Wellington Industries to the next level while giving you the career advancement you've earned." As they spent the rest of the morning working through the details of Maria's proposal, Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, he'd been a successful but isolated businessman whose wealth had insulated him from genuine human connection. Maria had been a homeless woman whose circumstances had stripped away everything except her essential character and determination. Now, they were discussing a business partnership that could benefit them both, while building something larger than either of them could accomplish alone. The transformation seemed almost miraculous, but Marcus understood that it hadn't been based on luck or charity. It had been built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of trust that developed when people consistently showed up for each other. "There's something else I want to discuss," Marcus said as they concluded their review of the partnership proposal. "Something more personal than business." Maria's expression became cautious again, the look she got when conversations moved into territory that might affect their professional relationship. "What's that?" Marcus hesitated, realizing he was about to cross a line they'd carefully maintained throughout their working relationship. But recent weeks had made him aware of feelings that went beyond professional respect and partnership. "I know we've been careful to keep our relationship strictly professional," he said, "and I want you to know that the partnership offer isn't conditional on anything personal. Your answer to my business proposal shouldn't be influenced by what I'm about to say." "Marcus," Maria said quietly, "what are you about to say?" I'm attracted to you, Marcus admitted. Not just professionally, though that's certainly part of it. I'm attracted to your intelligence, your integrity, your sense of humor, the way you see possibilities where other people see problems. I've been thinking about you in ways that go beyond our work relationship, and I wanted you to know that before we finalize any business arrangements. Maria was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus couldn't read her expression. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Can I ask you something honestly? Always. Are you attracted to me, or are you attracted to the idea of me? The story of helping someone and having them be grateful and devoted to you. It was such a direct and challenging question that Marcus had to pause and examine his own motivations carefully. Was his attraction based on genuine compatibility and connection, or was it wrapped up in some kind of savior complex? Both, initially, he admitted, but that's not what it is now. I'm attracted to the woman who had the courage to propose a business partnership 6 months after being homeless. I'm attracted to someone who speaks her mind, even when it's uncomfortable. I'm attracted to someone who makes me laugh and challenges my assumptions and sees the world in ways that make me want to be a better person. Maria nodded slowly, as if his answer had confirmed something she'd been wondering about. I'm attracted to you too, she said quietly. But I'm also scared of what that means for everything we've built together professionally. Why scared? Because if we try a personal relationship and it doesn't work out, I could lose not just the romantic connection, but also the professional partnership and the friendship that's become so important to me. That's a lot of risk for something that might not work out. Marcus understood her concern, and he appreciated that she was thinking through the potential consequences rather than just following her emotions. It was another example of the practical wisdom that had drawn him to her from the beginning. What if we took it slow, he suggested. What if we formalized the business partnership first, got that established and working well, and then explore the personal side very carefully with clear communication about boundaries and expectations? That might work, Maria said, though she still looked uncertain. But I want you to promise me something. Name it. Promise me that if the personal relationship doesn't work out, you won't let that affect our business partnership. I need to know that my professional future doesn't depend on my romantic availability. I promise, Marcus said solemnly. Your professional value to this company isn't connected to any personal relationship between us. If we try dating and it doesn't work out, that won't change my respect for your capabilities or my commitment to our business partnership. Maria smiled then, the kind of unguarded expression that Marcus had learned to treasure. In that case, she said, I'd be interested in exploring both possibilities, the business partnership and the personal relationship. But let's start with business and see how that goes. As they shook hands to seal their business agreement, Marcus felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with financial success or professional achievement. He was entering in a partnership with someone he trusted, respected, and cared about deeply. Someone whose judgment he valued and whose company he enjoyed. Someone who had challenged him to become a better version of himself. 6 months ago, a chance encounter in the rain had introduced him to a woman eating a sandwich with quiet dignity despite desperate circumstances. Today, that same woman was becoming his business partner and possibly much more. The transformation had been remarkable for both of them, but Marcus understood that the real magic hadn't been in the external changes. The real magic had been in recognizing each other's essential worth and choosing to build something meaningful together. As Maria returned to her desk to begin drafting partnership documents, and Marcus prepared for his first meeting as a business owner with a true partner, both of them felt the deep satisfaction that comes from taking a leap of faith and discovering that someone trustworthy was there to catch you. The rain that had brought them together had been just the beginning of their story. The best chapters, they both sensed, were still being written.